نبرات شعري سطرت لمداد حبري والقلم نبرات شعري سطرت لمداد حبري والقلم نبرات شعري سطرت لمداد حبري والقلم هيا قصائد سائلي قلب النوى ليس الشبم هيا قصائد سائلي قلب النوى ليس الشبم
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to O People of the Book. Welcome to our Saturday session of Evolution of Fiqh, and I hope everybody's okay. I hope everybody's had a nice, well, the weekend is coming for you lot, and my weekend is finishing because tomorrow I start work again. Here we work on Sundays. Our weekend here is Friday and Saturday. So you're entering into the weekend, and I hope you have a good weekend. Okay, and second point now is please subscribe, like, and share. Yeah, because we always have what do you call it, content for you, and we're finishing this book now. We're getting closer to the end. We've almost reached a quarter now, and inshallah after this we've got more content coming up for you as well. So please subscribe, like, and share, and also hit the bell hard so that everybody can hear. And the other thing is, as well as usual, if you want to support the dawah, please go to our Patreon, which you will find in the link. Right, okay, good. This confirms that I'm online. I just wanted to know if I'm coming out. Okay, so yeah, you go to my Patreon, and inshallah in my Patreon you will see all the articles and my book and everything that I'm working on. And please make that I get that motivation to write again and everything. Okay, we're doing the evolution of fiqh. We've been going through all the different stages and everything, and we've been going through the different scholars, different schools and everything. Now we've reached the sixth stage, which is called the stagnation and decline. Okay, so this is the stagnation and decline of the actual the evolution of fiqh itself. Nothing to do with the stagnation of Islam or the stagnation of Sharia or whatever. This is to do with the stagnation of the actual fiqh itself. Okay, this stage covers approximately 6 centuries, starting with the sacking of Baghdad in 1258 and the execution of the last Abbasid Caliph Al-Mu'tasim. And ending around the middle of the 19th century of the Christian era. This period also represents the rise of the Ottoman Empire, founded in 1299 by Turkish leader Uthman I, until its decline under the attack of the European colonialism. Sorry. It happens sometimes. Anyway, so we're going to go through this now. We're going to go through this period, this last period, and inshallah we will inshallah we will go through the period that we're actually in. This prevailing characteristic of the period was that of the taqleed, the blind following of madhab. Now you have to understand that we're in a period now where people just follow madhab, and a lot of them don't know. Even some of the scholars, I was surprised today to hear somebody mention, he was taking only one madhab, but I remember a couple of weeks ago or last week, we went through one case where the touching, lamsa, lams means to touch, if you touch your wife or whatever, and certain madhab habit that if you touch your wife without any desires, you don't have to do wudu again, and certain habit that if you do touch your wife or any woman, but if any woman just touches you or whatever goes past, you have to do with it again. Now, can you imagine if you went to Hajj or you went to Umrah and you're walking and a woman just goes past you and brushes past you or whatever? What happens? You can do your wudu again? Out of all these people. Now, somebody had mentioned it today, and I was kind of like, I didn't want to, he's supposed to be a learned brother or whatever, but it seems that he has certain leaning towards one madhab alone, and he didn't explain to the people that there are different rulings of this. Like I explained last time, that something that, like, your wudu doesn't break if you don't have any sexual desires. If it's just you're kissing your wife on the cheek and wishing a good salam, you're going to the masjid or you're going to wherever, and you have wudu, your wudu doesn't break. Whereas some others think that, even without them sexual desire or whatever, it breaks. So, like I said, this period that we're talking about is a period of taqlid, which is the blind following of the madhab. And I gave the example earlier, just a while ago now, that there's even people who are knowledgeable people who are actually leaning to one side of the madhab and giving only one version of it, whereas his brother should have explained that this madhab says this and this madhab says that. And actually, like I said, I wasn't I wasn't able to answer him back, so I just left it, kind of thing. Anyway, this degeneration trend resulted in the dropping of all forms of ijtihad and the evolution of the madhabs into total separate entities closely resembling sects. Now, when you look at the madhabs today, it looks like everyone is in their own little sect. Everyone is in their own little group nowadays. It's not as if we're all under Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and these are just schools of thought or whatever. It feels like the way it feels like is everyone is in their own little sect. The compilation of fiqh during this period was limited to commenting on previous works and was directed towards the promotion of individual madhabs. Thus, the dynamism of fiqh was lost, and many of the laws became increasingly outmoded and inapplicable in their existing form. Now, you have some people today who have the guts, who have the whatever word can I use, to come and say that Islam needs to be reformed. Yes, Islam needs to be reformed, to be brought back to the original form of the Quran and Sunnah. We need to go back to the Quran and Sunnah, like what Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab done. He reformed Islam. Not that Islam needs to be reformed and things they need not to be practiced and the Sharia need not. No. That's not how Islam needs to be reformed. Not that type of reformation, but returning back to the roots, returning back to the original Quran and Sunnah. You see, so the thing is that here now it says that and many of the laws became increasingly outmoded and inapplicable in their existence. In order to fill this legislative gap, European law codes were gradually introduced in place of some of the Islamic laws, which had fallen into disuse. Eventually, with the advance of the European colonialism and the breaking up of the Muslim empire, European laws supplanted Islamic laws. Now we see in a lot of our Muslim countries, like, we see that, European laws, which are secular laws, have actually replaced Islamic laws. They've given precedent. We take, for example, polygyny, which is something that, has so much advantage in Islam for the women more than the men. And today, even the women, they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to know about it, because sorry, I think I need to take this off. I thought my my co-host was going to be here, but it seems that she's busy nowadays, and she cannot make it. Anyway, if she can, she'll be making it. Anyway, so European laws have taken precedence now over Islamic laws. Yeah, you have more banks that give that deal with interest than banks that don't, and people don't look left and right and think, oh, I'm going to go to an Islamic bank. No, they just take what is being offered to them by the non-Muslim laws and everything. So the Islamic laws it says which have fallen into disuse. Eventually, with the advance of European colonialism and breaking up of the Muslim empire, European laws supplanted Islamic laws. You see, people go to school today and they want to go to these Christian schools. They want to get them, Christian knowledge and everything. So, we find that. One second, what is this? Yeah, so we find that why wasn't I going live on my okay, yeah, all right, okay, now you're live. Okay, so yeah, so we find that we find that the Islamic laws of the European laws have supplanted the Islamic laws, and it's a shame actually, because what advantage do these laws have? What are they offering us that Islam doesn't? Implementing Islam is the best form of laws that you can have. But today you find a lot of Muslims don't want that. Okay, certain reformers sought to stem the tide of stagnation and decline, calling for a return to the original purity of Islam and its laws. However, factionalism has continued to this present day, in spite of the increase and institutional teaching of comparative fiqh. Now, what happens is some people who claim to be so some people like I mentioned earlier on, the people who want to bring reform, original reformers now. We're not talking about these people these these scholars who supposedly want reform and want to change Islam. No, we're talking people who want to stem the tide of stagnation and decline. They want to stop that and calling to the original purity of Islam. Like I mentioned earlier on, this is what we need. We need to go back to the origins. We need to go back to the Quran and Sunnah. Yeah, we don't need anybody to come and change the laws and whatever and make us like Christianity. We don't need that. Okay. Now the emergence of taqleed, which is a blind following of the madhab. The scholars of this period left all forms of ijtihad and unanimously issued a legal ruling, which was intended to close the door of ijtihad permanently. They reasoned that all possible issues had already been raised and addressed, and there was therefore no need for ijtihad. This is what some of the scholars are saying today, that no need for ijtihad anymore. They've closed the door for ijtihad because there's no need for it. Everything has been settled. Everything is, every score has been settled. Every thing has been explained or whatever. So according to some, you don't need ijtihad anymore. With that step, a new concept of madhab arose. Namely, that one of the four madhabs had to be followed for one's Islam to be valid. Now, remember earlier on, I've been repeating this a lot in the sessions, that all these teachers learned under one another. Yeah, they learned the same thing. They learned the same thing, but the things that they were propagating, sometimes others didn't get the specific hadith, or they didn't trust the specific person, or they didn't, or they found that this hadith was weak. But they all studied under the same person, so there didn't have to be this breakaway from one another. But today, what is happening is, we are naming ourselves. I'm Hanafi, and I'm a Hanbali. I'm a Shafi'i. So we're closing ourselves in a box, yeah, and labeling ourselves under one madhab. And some people are doing it in such a way to make it as if your Islam is not valid if you don't follow a certain madhab. Some people won't even marry their daughters to somebody else who is under the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, following the same laws and regulations and following the same methodology, but because he's following under a different madhab, he's Shafi'i, the girl's family is what do you call it, Hanafi. So the girl's family said, no, I'm not going to marry our daughter to him because of that, you see. So it's become so bad. So stringent now that this type of thing happens. In time, this concept became firmly embedded among the masses, as well among the scholars of fiqh. Thus, the religion of Islam itself became restricted within the confines of the four madhabs: Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali. Now, remember, we went through all these and we found that there were madhabs that were even more prominent than these, although they were more prominent, but because of their weakness, they didn't copy they didn't take down their teachings, and they were forced to flee some of them. So what has happened is now we now have become stringent on following four madhabs, as if this is all that there was before. Yeah, the be all and the end all, which wasn't. Yeah, these schools of thought these schools of law came to be considered divinely ordained manifestations of Islam. So some people now would stick to these madhabs as if this is divinely ordained by Allah. Even if it's something more authentic than what they're talking about. But no, because my madhab talks about it, because my madhab says it, I have to stick to it. Yeah, even if the Prophet ﷺ said something different, then you get labeled. You get labeled like I said, you get labeled what do you call it? Wahhabi and all this stuff, just because you're following certain schools of thought or whatever, people get labeled. Some people have even gone as far as takfiring others, because of that. This is how stringent it's become. Yeah, and people believe that the school of thoughts are divinely ordained. All of them were supposed to be completely correct, as we understood before, equal and representative of true Islam. Yet there were innumerable differences amongst them. In fact, there were scholars in this period. Who interpreted some hadith in such a way as to prove that the Prophet ﷺ himself had predicted the appearance of the Imams and their madhabs. Consequently, an attempt to go beyond these canonical madhabs was considered heretical, and anyone who refuses to follow these madhabs was classified as an apostate. Now, I'm just mentioned that now, that people had gone so far as to takfir others if they don't follow these this one particular stringent madhab kind of thing. So this is how far we've gone. The hyper-conservative scholars of this stage even went so far as to rule that whoever was caught transferring from one madhab to another was liable to punishment at his discretion, at the discretion of the local judge. A ruling was also made in Hanafi madhab prohibiting the marriage of a Hanafi to a Shafi, like I mentioned earlier on. Yeah, so you can see how it's become. Your own Muslim brother, who under the same Ahl Sunnah. We're not talking about marrying Ahl Sunnah to Shia, or marrying Ahl Sunnah to Ismaili, or no, we're talking about marrying under the same Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Yeah, but it has become to the stage now where people have adhered so much to these stringent schools of thought that you will find that the marriage of a Hanafi, that the family will not, if they are Hanafi, they will not marry their child to a Shafi. And even the second most important pillar of Islam, Salah, was not spared the effects of madhab fanatics. The followers of various madhabs began to refuse to pray behind the imams of other madhabs. So this is why you'll find masjids are open. On one side, you'll get a masjid which is a Hanafi masjid, and then you'll get another masjid which is Hanbali or Shafi or whatever on the other side. And they're both praying the same way. They're both praying same time. They're both reading the same Quran. They're both reading following the same hadith. Yet the following of this one particular madhab has become so stringent that people have refused to pray against imams. This resulted in this resulted in the building of separate prayer niches in the masjid communities, where more than one madhab exists. You will find in certain countries, not all countries are masjids funded by the government. It's usually private in certain countries, non-Muslim countries. So you'll find people from such denomination, such madhab, will go and knock on people's doors and go and collect money to build a masjid of their madhab. Then you will find somebody from different madhab will come and they will build them from, and there will be arguments. These people who come to collect money might say, no, we don't follow your madhab, so we're not going to finance your masjid or whatever. This is the extent that it has come, the division that it has brought to the people, to the community. Yeah. This resulted in the building of separate prayer niches in the masjid, communities where more than one madhab existed. The masjids of this type can still be seen in places like Syria, where Sunni Muslims follow either Hanafi or Shafi'i madhab. Even the most holy masjid, al-Masjid al-Haram of Mecca, which represents the unity of Muslims in the religion of Islam, was affected. Separate prayer niches were set up around the Kaaba, one of an imam from each of the schools. And when the time for Salah came, an imam from one of the madhabs would lead congregation of followers from his madhab into prayer. Then another imam from the other madhab. So we had more than one jama'ah here now. Yeah, in Haram Sharif itself, we had more than one jama'ah. When the time came, one madhab went and prayed with the imam, another madhab went and prayed with the imam, and it went on like this. Yeah. Then another imam from another madhab would lead his congregation of followers, and so on. It is interesting to note that separate places of prayer for each madhabs remained around the Kaaba until the first quarter of the 20th century, when Abdul Aziz bin Saud and his army conquered Mecca and united all worshippers behind a single imam, regardless of his or their madhabs. So you see how far people had gone, to actually separate the ummah. That until the what's the name? This was done in Mecca, in Haram Sharif. Yeah. So you can see how stringent people were until recently. Yeah. So okay. So we move now to the reasons of taqleed, the reasons of the blind following. Okay, taqleed, blind following, has been distinguished from ittiba', reasoned following. Now, if you just follow blindly, you don't care what the Quran or Sunnah says. You just follow blindly or whatever, and you don't care. You're going to follow your madhab or whatever. Then that is called taqleed. But ittiba' means reasoned following. Now you're getting reasoned, you're opening up the books, you're checking, you're asking, you're doing your research or whatever. That is called ittiba'. Yeah. The principle of following the rulings of our predecessors is normal and natural. In fact, it is by following closely, by closely following early interpretations of Islam, that the message of Islam remains uncorrupted through time. Yeah. So the thing is that, who are we going to follow? We're going to follow the later people, or we're going to follow the ones who are nearer to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Yeah. Those who he taught, those who sat with him, those who followed him. Then they taught their students, and their students taught their students. Yeah. The Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Tabi'in. These are the early people that we need to follow. Yeah. And for those early interpretations were founded on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's divine inspiration and his divinely guided style. Yeah. So obviously, as time went along, we saw how the corruption came in different caliphates and everything. Are we going to follow the later caliphates which have been corrupted, or are we going to go and follow the early generation, where the Prophet ﷺ said, خير الناس القرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. Yeah. So which the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of generations is my generation, and the one that follows, and the one that follows. So these three generations, if we take from them, then obviously we would be on the right path. Yeah. The Prophet ﷺ himself said that the best generation was his generation. Then the generation follow his, and then following that. However, since Muslims of earlier generation, with the exception of the Prophet, were not infallible, even those early interpretations should not be followed blindly. right? So we're following the Sahaba, but we can't just follow the Sahaba blindly. We have to know exactly what they said and whether this is authentic what they said, this is authentic what they practiced and everything. So we cannot just follow blindly without regard to certain basic principles of reason, which enable us to distinguish between the right and the wrong. So Prophet ﷺ said, follow the three generations. But when we're following the three generations, we don't follow them blindly. We seek reasoning. We seek to find out the truth. There are books that have been written. There are like a hadith that have been mentioned about the early generation, athar and everything. So we don't just follow them blindly. Okay. In this book, the term taqleed, blind following, is used to refer to the actions to those who slavishly follow a single madhab, regardless of errors that they see. So some people know that it's wrong, but I'm going to stick to this madhab because my madhab says so. Yeah. So I don't care. I know it's wrong, but I'm going to blindly follow it. I sit down and I listen to the imam in khutbah, and the imam says it, and because the imam says it, I believe him. I don't know where he got it from. I don't go and check. I don't go and read the hadith or whatever. So this is the blind following that we'll be talking about. As for common people who do not have the knowledge to make the independent decisions in doubtful situations, it is for them to follow whatever knowledge is available to them. Keep their minds open and rely on open-minded scholars such as possible. So you can't just take what the imam says and don't go and research, don't go and read, don't go and ask another sheikh or whatever and see where the actual truth is coming from. You just kind of follow blindly. That is wrong. Okay. Right. Okay. So now, Taqleed was the result of a number of factors, internal and external to the madhabs, which affected the development of fiqh and attitude of scholars. No one cause can be singled out as the main cause, nor can all the factors be identified. The following only a few of the more obvious factors which led to the stage of stagnation. Okay, so we're going to go through a few stages. We're going to go through a few factors, which will bring us to the stage of stagnation. First of all, the schools of fiqh were completely formed and the minutest detail worked out. The laws for what had occurred, as well as what might occur, were already deduced and recorded due to the intensive development of speculative fiqh. This left little room for ijtihad and originality. As a result, there developed an over-dependence on the work of early scholars of the madhabs. Okay, so we'll see that, we notice that the schools of fiqh were completely formed and they worked out all the details. So the scholars, became stagnant because there doesn't seem to be anything needed anymore for the use of ijtihad. So they kind of it was all set aside. Secondly, the Abbasid Caliphate, which had come to power under the banner of restoring Islamic law to its proper place, lost its power to kings and ministers, many of whom were Shiite, and the empire eventually broke up into mini stages. The new rule by proxy were more interested in private power struggles than in either religious scholarship or government according to Islamic law. So when we look at the Abbasid Caliphate, they were supposed to bring back this restoring of the Islamic law. Yeah, it lost its power. It lost its power when new kings came in and new empires and everything, and many of them were Shiite. So they were just setting aside the actual proper fiqh and just bringing in all sorts of whatever. They were just ruling just for the sake of creating governments and everything. Okay, not following the Quran and Sunnah. Number three, the crumbling of the Abbasid Empire into many states was accompanied by each state following the madhab. Spain, the Maliki madhab. Turkey and India, the Hanafi madhab. Okay, and yeah, Turkey and India, the Hanafi. Each state began the practice of choosing its governors, administrators, and judges, only from those who followed its official madhab. Consequently, scholars who wanted to become qadis, judges in courts of these states, had to follow the official madhab of that state. Now, we found that when the Abbasid Empire crumbled, all these states, all these mini states that were there, they started following specific madhabs. Spain, for example, was Maliki, and Turkey and India Hanafi. Right now, what happens is if there was somebody who was from a different madhab, but he wanted to be a judge in a specific country, he had to follow that madhab that was used in that country. He could not be Maliki judge being a judge in a Hanafi state. That was not accepted, kind of thing. So he had to follow the official madhab of the states. Some unqualified individuals began to claim the right to make ijtihad in order to twist the religion to suit their wishes. Now, today we have self-professed scholars. We have plenty of them all over the place. You can hear them all the time. You can hear them giving fatwa. You can hear them giving their opinion and everything. So you have some unqualified individuals who began to claim the right to make ijtihad, so they can make their ijtihad, something happened. And the thing that I don't understand with people today, a lot of people, especially us da'is and everything, people will come to us as da'is and ask us about fiqh issues. Now, we are not qualified to give them a fatwa for fiqh issues. Maybe we might know part of it. We can give some answer to it and then tell the brother, well, go and ask a scholar. But I find that some people, I don't know if it's deliberate, so they don't follow it, or they'll say, Fulan told me about it, so I will follow it that way or whatever, They will come, and especially in Clubhouse, you will find that. You will find people who will come and they know we are da'is. They know we are only da'is. And they will come and they will kind of in order to be able to twist the religion to follow their wishes, so they will come to a da'i, people who doesn't have much knowledge. I've spoken to people before and they say, oh, I cannot ask imams questions because they shout at me and don't answer my question. Now, an imam could be anybody. An imam could be a muezzin. He could be a hafiz of Quran only. Not necessarily because he's an imam does that mean that he's a big sheikh or whatever in fiqh or whatever. You need to know who to go and ask for any fatwa. Yeah. If it's something to do with aqidah and you go and ask a hafiz of Quran, he's not going to be able to answer you, really, So this is why, you have some unqualified individuals who began to claim the right because now people were asking them. So, they're giving their own. Consequently, many incompetent scholars began making rulings which misguided the masses on a number of issues. In the ensuing confusion, the reputable scholars of the day tried to close the door of ijtihad in order to protect the Sharia from being tampered with. See, so because of this now, ijtihad had to be closed because people were just using ijtihad the way they wanted. The way they wanted, and they were making their own fatwa and everything. So the reputable scholars now, not the self-professed ones, the reputable scholars had to close the door of ijtihad in order to protect it, in order to protect the Sharia, because we know that if the Sharia had been tampered with, then we'll end up like Christianity and all other religions. Okay, now the compilation of fiqh. The same factors which led to taqleed also caused scholars to confine their creative activity to merely editing and revising previous works. The fiqh books of early scholars were condensed, abridgment of them were made. These abridgments were later shortened in order to make them easy to memorize. You see, like today we have books written by scholars which would specialize on only one subject. The book of Salah Salah. We'll have the book of Salah only. We'll have the book of marriage only. We'll have the book of Zakat only, separated. A lot of them have been abridged in order for us to be able to memorize them easily. Yeah. So they're not like the massive volumes that when they were written before, and many of them were actually put together to rhyme. This process of condensing continued until summaries which became virtual riddles of the students of the day. The following generation of scholars began to write explanations of the summaries and poems. Later, scholars wrote commentaries on the explanations, and others added footnotes commentaries. During this period, some books of fundamentals of fiqh, usul of fiqh, were written. In these works, the correct method of making ijtihad was outlined, and conditions were laid down by these scholars, who were so strict that they excluded not only the scholars of their time, but also many earlier scholars who had made them ijtihad. So we see that, much of the books of usul al-fiqh that were written meticulously by certain scholars, and they excluded not only the scholars of their time, but they excluded earlier scholars who made ijtihad. There were also a few books which were written on comparative fiqh during this period. As in the previous period, the opinions of the madhab and their proofs were collected and criticized in these books. The authors then defined as most accurate those opinions, which were held by particular madhabs. Now, you will find in a lot of books today, you will find the comparative madhab, where it will tell you that yes, the Hanafi madhab hold this, but the Shafi madhab hold that, and the Hanbali madhab hold this, but the Maliki madhab hold that. So you will get the four different madhab, what they say. If three madhabs agree, yeah, muttafaqun alayh, if they agree on that, fine, it will tell you that these three agree, and this one says differently. If three disagree or two disagree, or what, they will tell you. So they're giving you the comparative fiqh during the period. During the end of this period, an attempt was made to codify Islamic law under the auspices of the Ottoman caliphs. A panel of 7 top-ranking scholars of fiqh was formed and entrusted with the job. It was completed in 1876 CE and enforced by the Sultan throughout the Ottoman Empire under the title Majalla al-Ahkam al-Adili, the just codes. However, even this seemingly noble attempt was affected by the madhab fanaticism. Okay. All of the scholars on the committee were appointed from the Hanafi madhab. Consequently, the resulting code totally ignored the contributions of other madhabs. So there were at a particular time, there was a panel of people that actually of scholars who were formed, and they were given the job of compiling the fiqh. However, these 7 people, which were in the time of the Ottoman Empire, they actually wrote a book which was called Majalla al-Ahkam al-Adili, which was a just code. But these 7 people were actually chosen all from the Hanafi madhab. You see, so again, this stringent, I mean, the word is not coming to me now, but the sticking to the one madhab was what they chose, instead of choosing ulama from different madhabs. All of them were from one madhab, and this resulted to the code totally it totally ignored the contributions of other madhabs to the fiqh. With the expeditions of Columbus and Vasco da Gama, Western Europe states began to capture the roots and sources of international trade. Subsequently, European imperialism, beginning with Java, which fell to the Dutch in 1684, absorbed Muslim East Asian states. Now, when these people started to colonize, the Dutch and everything. Now there was a lot of the East, what do you call it? The South Asian, no, Southeast Asian countries, and they were they were colonizing these countries. Now, yeah, it fell in the hands of the Dutch. For example, you get them Indonesia, and you get them a few other countries in that area that are actually colonized by the Dutch. After Transylvania and Hungary fell from the Ottoman hands to Austria in 1699, and the defeat of the Ottomans by Russia in Russo-Turkish War in 1768 to 1774, the European territories of the Ottoman Empire were soon lost, and one after the other. This process culminated in the total dissolution of the Ottoman Empire during the First World War, and its division into colonies and protectorates. Consequently, European codes replaced Islamic law through the Muslim world. As I mentioned earlier on, as these wars were happening, as these Europeans were taking over these Ottoman areas, the Russians, the Austrians, the Dutch and everything, they were applying their laws now. Their laws became superior. Their laws preceded the Islamic laws. Although European colonialism was officially ended by some years ago, Islamic law has remained in disuse in all Muslim countries, with exception of Saudi Arabia, which has codified Islamic law according to Hanbali madhab, Pakistan to a large degree according to Hanafi madhab, and Iran, which has recently done so according to the Jafari madhab. Now, something important now to mention is that yeah, I was going to say something, and I actually forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, so we can see that, like, there were certain countries. Yeah, today we will find that most Muslim countries, like, have very little Islamic law in them. Their laws although their names are Islamic, they could be speaking Arabic. They could have a good percentage of Islam in them. Their population could be 90%, 99% Muslims, but you will find that the Islamic laws have been diluted with a lot of the European colonialism law. I don't know why I can't pronounce that word today. Yeah. So actually, the secular laws have actually taken over, and this is why you will find that people now, like I said, something like polygyny, which was something which was practiced, which was sanctioned by Allah in the Quran, and also which was practiced by the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, by the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Tabi'in, and it was one of the best things that happened to Islam. Yet, because of the Western laws, because of the Western the colonialism, they made it a taboo. Now, today you will find Muslim countries, you'll find Muslim lands who totally disregarded. They prefer to accept that a man has a girlfriend or 10 girlfriends or mistress or whatever, than to have a law like polygyny. Yeah, and there are other things as well that that we can find in the banking system, the economic system and everything. And only in certain countries it has remained. In Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, and the Islamic Shia state of Iran, which follows the Jafari madhab. reformers. In spite of the general decay described above, there existed from time to time throughout this period a few outstanding scholars who opposed taqlid and dared to raise the banner of ijtihad. They called for a return to the roots of the religion, the true sources of Islamic law, and to reliance on these foundations above all else. Some of these scholars and their contributions are described here hereafter. Okay, like I mentioned earlier on, when we talk of reforming, especially nowadays, you have a lot of people who are out there, Islam needs to be reformed, Islam needs to be reformed. Even Islamic scholars, when we talk of reform here, don't talk about changing what is in the Quran, removing jihad, removing this, removing polygamy. No, that's not what the reform is about. The reform that we need in Islam is to bring us back to our roots, to bring us back to the Quran and Sunnah. This is the reason why Islam is like a football today. It's like Muslims are being blamed for everything. Like, Muslims are being kicked here and there. Nobody's taking care of Muslims. Why? Because we are going away from Islam, and that's the way we want it. We want to change the religion. We don't want to follow the religion. But no, we need to reform and go back to the Quran and Sunnah, the original way of the Salaf, of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the 3 generations that came after him. That's what reform means. When we're talking of reform, we're not talking about changing anything in Islam or bringing new, because the world is new, so we're going to accept LGBT, we're going to accept, other stuff. We're going to start bringing alcohol or whatever. Alcohol will be permitted or whatever. No, that is not acceptable. We find today, just recently in the news, a couple of weeks ago, I found out that Tunisia wants to take Islam out of its laws. It used to have some Islam in its laws. It wants to remove that completely. And there was some sort of a referendum. I think there were some demonstrations by the people or whatever, So this is what's happening. So we are going to be talking about now some of the reformers that came. First of all was Sheikh Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah. 1263 to 1328, was not foremost among the reformers of his period because of his challenge. Because of his challenge of the status quo. Many of his contemporaries declared him an apostate and had the authorities jail him repeatedly. Ibn Taymiyyah was, however, one of the greatest scholars of his time. Initially, he had studied fiqh according to the Hanbali madhab, but did not restrict himself to it. He studied the sources of Islamic law in depth and mastered all Islamic sciences which were known at that time. Furthermore, he examined the writings of various sects which had broken off from Islam, studied the religious books of the Christians and Jews and their various sects, and wrote extensive critiques on all of them. Ibn Taymiyyah also took part in jihad against the Mongols, who had occupied the eastern and northern province of the former Abbasid state, and were among the greatest Islamic scholars of their time, and carried on to the next generation the banner of ijtihad, and returned to the pure sources of Islam which he had raised. Among them was Ibn al-Qayyim, the great scholar in the field of fiqh. Well, he was one of the students of Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, and Ibn Qayyim, a great scholar in the fields of fiqh and hadith criticism, and Ibn Kathir, a master in tafsir, history and hadith. These were 2 students of Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, and we can see how, because he was trying to bring back the people back to the Quran and Sunnah, he was declared an apostate, like they do today. They call people Wahhabi and all that, So he was jailed several times, but he didn't follow just one madhab. He kind of studied under different madhabs, like we mentioned earlier on, and he studied a lot about various sects. He's written very good books. One of the great books of Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah is Manhaj al-Sunnah, which he writes against it's a refutation of the heresy of the Shia. Very nice book, Alhamdulillah. If you can get hold of it and read it. I'd like to remind you that you're watching O People of the Book, and you're watching our Saturday fiqh series, fiqh session, and we're doing evolution of fiqh. And I'd like to remind you as well to like, to subscribe, to like and share, and also hit the bell. Okay, now we're talking about the reformers. We're talking about the reformers of Islam who came at a certain particular time. Muhammad ibn Ali al-Shawkani, right, 1757 to 1835, born near a town of Shawkan in Yemen, was also among the reformers of this period. Al-Shawkani studied fiqh under the Zaydi madhab. Now remember, the Zaydi madhab in its original form was actually the closest from the Shia side to the Sunnis. We could pray behind them, we could marry their daughters, we can, they were basically before, not what happened now. Now there's been a lot of problems, and the Zaydis of today cannot be trusted, cannot be called under Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, because they have actually pledged allegiance to the Ithna Asharis. They've pledged allegiance to the Jafaris, the Iranian, because of finance to fight the battle that they're fighting at the moment. So Sheikh Shawkani studied fiqh under the Zaydi madhab and became one of its outstanding scholars. He then went on in-depth study of the hadith of his time. At this point, he freed himself of the madhab and began making independent ijtihad. He wrote a number of works in fiqh and its fundamentals, in which issues studied from the point of view of all the madhabs were concluded, with solutions based solely on the most accurate proof and convincing arguments. Like I said, when we study the fiqh, when we look at the fiqh, we look at the fiqh of all the madhabs, and we pull out from that what is the most accurate. We pull out from that what is most relevant to what we are arguing, what we're talking about. Imam al-Shawkani took the position that taqleed was haram and wrote a number of books on the topic. For example, Al-Qawl al-Mufid fi Hukm al-Taqleed. Consequently, he also came under attack from most of the scholars of his time. Another noteworthy reformer was the great scholar Ahmad ibn Abdul Rahim, better known as Shah Waliullah Dehlawi. 1703 to 1762. He was born in the Indian subcontinent, where taqleed was perhaps the most rampant. After he had mastered the various Islamic sciences, he called for the reopening of the door of ijtihad and the reunification of the schools of fiqh. Yeah, after as we know that, especially in the Asian subcontinent, this is where there was a lot of the divisions. This is where the Hanafi madhab was most prevalent, and usually you would have had problems in many countries, Bangladesh, India, and everything. Masjids here, masjids there, and fights between them or whatever. Now this sheikh Shah Waliullah al-Dehlawi, he came to reform. And he'd mastered all the different sciences, and he wanted to reopen the doors of ijtihad. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, the doors of ijtihad were closed by prominent scholars because of the fact of these self-professed scholars that were coming and giving their own fatwa, their own rulings and everything, and he wanted to reunify the schools of fiqh. In this effort to re-examine Islamic principles and to find out what the authority, the legal schools based on their regulations, Shah Waliullah rejuvenated the study of hadith. Although he did not go so far as to reject the existing fiqh schools, nevertheless, he taught that everyone was free to choose a particular decision different from that taken by the schools to which he belonged to himself, if he was convinced that case was better confirmed by hadith. However, overall state of the degeneration and stagnation had continued until today, despite the efforts of the modern thinkers like Jamaluddin al-Afghani, 1839 to 1897, who traveled throughout the Muslim world calling for reform. Another reformer now by the name of Jamaluddin al-Afghani. Maybe you haven't heard these names before. Maybe you are new to these names. But remember, these were the people who were trying to bring the people back to the Quran and Sunnah, trying to bring the people back to following to stop being stringent on one madhab, and to kind of like, take all the madhabs and see which one was more accurate. These were the scholars that were coming, and they were bringing back these not new, but they're trying to revive and get rid of taqlid, blind following. Okay. Jamaluddin traveled to India, Mecca, and Constantinople, settling finally in Egypt. He called for free political, religious, and scientific thought. When they say there is no free speech in Islam, these scholars were calling for free political, religious, and scientific thought. Yeah. So how can there not be free speech in Islam when our own scholars were fighting for it? And he denounced taqlid and state corruption. Jamaluddin thought these ideas at the university of Jamaluddin thought that these ideas at the university were extremists. For example, he elevated the human mind and its logic deductions to a level equal to that of divine revelation. His intentions also became suspect due to his involvement with the new Masonic movement, which was at the time establishing new branches in the Middle East. Okay. Now, Muhammad Abdu, 1849 to 1905, was among the Afghanis and most famous student under the influence of Afghani and Ibn Muhammad Abdu, and Taqlid and his supporters were systematically attacked. But due to Muhammad Abdu's leaning towards extreme modernism, he eventually deviated in some of his interpretations and legal ruling. For example, in his tafsir of the Quran, there's a mistake here now, yeah. He profits of directly performed by God through the forces of nature. To him, there's a mistake there. I don't know what's the name, but there's a mistake. Maybe he mentions or he says that the prophets performed directly by God through his forces of nature. Maybe he's talking about miracles here. I don't know. But there is a mistake. To him, the flock of birds which dropped clay pebbles on the army of Abraha and the elephant during the attack of the Kaaba was simply airborne microbes which spread disease amongst them. Likewise, he made a fatwa allowing Muslims to be involved in business transactions involving interest. He based his ruling on the fiqh principle that dire necessity makes forbidden allowable. Now, this is this is not the majority understanding, the consensus, but this is what Muhammad Abdu, this is what he found in business transactions, that when there was a need, a dhururiyat, then at the time of dhururiyat, then according to him, interest was allowed, and he based his ruling that the dire necessity makes the forbidden allowable. The fallacy of his ruling lay in the fact that fiqh specifically defines dire necessity as involving matters of life and death or loss of limb, and this was simply not a case where business transactions are concerned. Now, if you enter into a business transaction, you don't need to. There is no fard, there is no dururiyat in entering in a business transaction, which will force you to have to get involved in interest. Yet, he was saying that, like, necessity forbids, the necessity allows what was forbidden. But how can a business transaction now become so dururi that you have to deal in interest with it? Yeah. So this is what makes it a fallacy now, because a business transaction, you can say, no, sorry, I don't want to get involved in the this business transaction because it's dealing with riba. I don't want to get involved in it. Yeah. Okay. And okay, Muhammad Abdul's main student, Muhammad Rashid Rida, carried on his mentor's attack on taqleed, but rejected most of his teacher's excesses. However, other students of Muhammad Abdul became the nucleus of the extreme modernist movement and deviated in many areas even more than their teacher. For example, his student Qasim Amin, died in 1908, was the first to make a vehement attack on polygamy. As I mentioned earlier on, the simplicity of Islamic divorce and the use of the veil. Now, you see, some people came to reform, but they were bringing wrong reformation. What they were bringing were things that was actually disprove, not disproving, but actually bringing bad to the deen. So rather reforming and bringing back to the Quran and Sunnah. You see now, for example, the issue of business transactions. You see the issue of his student, for example, his student Qasim Amin, who made a vehement attack on polygamy, which I just spoke about earlier on, which is actually something that brings many advantages in Islam. Yet you see these people who came, they attacked it, and the simplicity of Islamic divorce and the use of the veil. Yeah, they attacked them. Other scholars of the 20th century, such as Hassan al-Banna, founder of Ikhwan al-Muslimin movement, Sayyid Abdullah Maududi, the founder of the Jama'ah Islamiyah movement, and more recently, the great hadith scholar of our time, Nasruddin al-Albani, have picked up the banner of Islamic revival and have called for the unification of the madhabs. But to this day, the majority of scholars remain firmly bound to sectarian Islam in the form of one of the four madhabs. In doing so, they unknowingly perpetrate division among the ranks of the Muslim nation. Nor does there reappear to be much hope for an end to this process in the near future. With very few exceptions, present-day Islamic institutions of learning throughout the Muslim world actively propagate a sectarian view of Islam. So you will find that many of the scholars that are coming are actually blending a lot of the Islamic rulings into their Western society, their sectarian countries, and they're bringing kind of sectarian Islam in the form of the four madhabs. In doing so, they're unknowingly causing division among the ranks of the Muslims. It is true that the comparative fiqh is now being given a prominent place in the syllabuses of these institutions, and the study of hadith has become more popular than it was a century ago. But the reality is that the two prominently dynamic and regenerative subjects have been diffused by the sectarian system of Islamic education. Each university adheres to the official madhab of the country in which it is situated, and thus all core fiqh courses in the Islamic law syllabus, called Sharia or Usul al-Din, are taught according to the state madhab. So any country that has courses that are teaching Usul al-Fiqh or Usul al-Din or Sharia will adhere to what the country itself. Muhammad Rayan, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And what are you saying? HLA. What's that? I don't understand what that is. But Assalamu alaikum to you, and welcome. Yeah. So anybody anybody who any country like that are teaching Sharia or Suluddin, those who are teaching it have to teach it according to the state, the madhab of the state. So even if that person is against the state madhab, he still has to teach it that way. This is done to fulfill the local government's need for judges who conform to the madhab used in the civil law system of the state. For example, the University of Al-Azhar in Egypt. Okay, in Egypt, the most venerated institution of in the Muslim world, is the only university in which all the major madhabs are taught. However, students entering the university are required to indicate their madhab, are placed in the same class. From the beginning of their studies until they graduate, all their professors will be from their own madhab. Accordingly, the position of the other madhabs are studied merely as oddities. So you will find that, like, when they join Al-Azhar, they have to say what madhab they are, and they will be studying their own madhab. But other madhabs will be just, maybe brushed on or whatever, and not actually taught the way it should be. And the great books of hadith are read more for the blessing than for the revelation of the truth. Whenever a conflicting opinion is encountered in the course of these studies, the teacher in the sectarian institution examines it superficially and rejects it in the line of the compelling argument. So because they're following sectarian laws, they look at the hadith and reject it. Like today, you have a lot of people are coming with hadith and rejecting hadith and not want to follow hadith or whatever. And this is what's happening in the environment where they're teaching hadith and all that. They just look at it and they just reject it in the line of the compelling arguments. We've reached the 101 time barrier now. So what I'll do is I'll carry on and finish this. There's a section summary here. So we'll finish the section summary, which is just another page, inshallah, and then we'll finish here for today. Okay, so which he develops to support the position of his particular madhab. Thus, although other positions may be supported by very strong proofs, the sectarian teacher's treatment denies them the consideration they deserve. Now, we've noticed today that especially in big universities, especially the non-Muslim universities, you'll have a non-Muslim who will be teaching you Islam. Yeah, somebody who doesn't even know anything about Islam, who doesn't know the roots, and will be teaching you Islam. And even when you get these Islamic universities, some of the Islamic universities, you will get somebody who might be from who might be very weak Muslim. Yeah, he's just studied Islam and he's not practicing it properly. He's practicing more the sectarian laws, but he'll be teaching it in the universities. We've reached to this point now today. Yeah, and you'll find that, the sectarian teachers' treatment denies them the consideration they deserve. Similarly, if a strong hadith, which appears contrary to the position taken by the madhab, is met while reading the book of hadith, the teacher either reinterprets it to support his madhab or deftly explains it away. So if he's found a weak hadith, he's going to explain it in his way. If he finds a strong hadith now that goes against what he believes, he's going to kind of explain it with his interpretation, or just put it to one side. We don't take note of it. We don't care about it. He'll just explain it away. And if neither of these two is possible, a series of weak hadith are quoted in support of the madhab's position, without the slightest mention that they are weak. Now, we see today a lot of people, a lot of the non-Muslims, they're throwing hadith at us that are weak. I just had one this afternoon on Facebook that we had to denounce. And a lot of the times they take off, they don't even know where the hadith is coming from. They will quote a fiqh book and they will mention something of aqidah in there. like, and I actually challenged someone. I said to him, this subject that you're talking about is a subject of aqidah, but the books that we've mentioned are the books of fiqh, which does not mention this. You see, so the same thing now. The teacher will either reinterpret, and then when the non-Muslims get that now, non-Muslims might be studying in the university and they studied under these teachers, and they find these weak hadith, and these weak hadith, they are being told that these weak hadith, according to the teacher, is just a normal hadith. Yeah, if there's no grading or whatever, then these people now will use this against us. You see, so without a slightest mention, they'll be used to support whatever teachings the teacher's giving, but they will not be mentioned. Oh, by the way, this hadith is weak, and we should not hold on to it or whatever. No, they'll just be taught as if they were Sahih hadith and Hasan and whatever. Yeah, I hope you understand what I'm saying, and we just have this section summary to finish, and then we'll finish for the day. In that way, it appears that there is a greater number of hadith supporting the madhab's position, and the students are convinced of the correctness of their madhab. So they will take the Sahih hadith and the weak hadith and jumble them all together just to kind of support that their madhab is correct. Yeah, that their madhab is correct, and this is the way they will do it. Okay, so now we move to the section summary, which is 7 points, and then we'll finish on there. So what we've been reading in this section, ijtihad in all its forms was put aside, and blind following, taqlid, one of the four madhabs, was made compulsory on all Muslims. We saw that, and we had examples and everything given, and even until today we can see how, like, people will be will strictly hold on to one madhab, and they will even leave what the Prophet ﷺ said. The four madhabs became totally incompatible, and the Muslim ummah was virtually split into four religious sects, as if it was religious sects. Yeah, they've become so stringent that they've become like sects. Number 3, scholarly activity was restricted to writing commentaries on previous works and promoting the position of the author's particular madhab, as in the period of consolidation. Number 4, they were commendable attempts by certain reformers to revive the original and dynamic nature of fiqh, but their efforts proved unequal to the task of eradicating madhab fanaticism, which had become so deeply ingrained. So we find that there were attempts by reformers to revive the original fiqh, but it didn't succeed that much. Some of them didn't succeed much, but some of them did. Yeah. Number 5, attempts at the codification of Islamic law was made, but the results suffered with sectarian views. And with the advent of European colonization, they were supplanted by European laws and codes. Now, in many of the Muslim lands, this was something that was a plan that they planned to conquer a lot of these Muslim lands. They divided them, Sykes-Picot and all that stuff. Like, all this is history. Maybe you should read about it. Many went to the French, went to the English, went to the Dutch, and their laws were taken away from them. Their identity was taken away from them, and European laws were implanted on them for so many years, so many countries. Today, you find a lot of Christians are asking us, like, why is Muslim countries so poor? Why are they so well? What's the word? Why are they so backwards? Well, who made them that way? Who came and colonized them? Who came and colonized them for 100 years? A lot of them, and took away their identity, took away their laws, took away the hijab from the women. The men were like, not practicing Islam anymore. A lot of countries, masjids were not allowed. So who brought this to them to take their laws away from them? Now that they're independent, some of them have stuck to these laws, and some of them are trying little by little to come back to their roots and everything. Yeah. So we have to understand that when the question is asked to us, about these Muslim countries, well, who put them in that position in the first place? Because they were colonized by the Europeans, who supplanted the Muslim laws by European laws. Okay, number 6, there has been some lessening of madhab fanaticism in recent years as a result of the former reformist movements and the widespread teaching of comparative fiqh in modern institutions of learning. Now, we know people like Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who came and he reformed, and like, we have Sheikh Al-Albani, who came and reformed as well. So obviously these madhab fanaticism in certain places, it has reduced, and because the scholars are working on teaching the comparative fiqh, teaching you what all the madhabs say, and then you choose what is more accurate amongst them. This is the way we should do. We don't stick to one madhab, but we take all of them. Okay, the Shafi said this, the Hanafi said this, just like the issue of lumps that I explained last time, the issue of touching. Yeah. If you take only one, then khalas, if you take only the view that you have to do your wudu if you are touched by a woman or whatever, then go to Hajj. Go to Hajj and see how you can manage there. Suddenly, you walk past and then Muslim sister by accident, just touches you or whatever. Now go and look for water to perform wudu. Yeah. So number 7, the state of stagnation and decline of fiqh and the existence of madhab factionalism have continued until the present day. Okay, so now we finish this. This is page 122. We will start next week, page 123, on the subject, the Imams and Taqleed. So we're going to go into the Imams and the blind following and and Taqleed. So this is next week. And I hope you have benefited from this, even those who are not watching straight away today. Maybe you will be watching tomorrow, the day after, a year after. I might be in my grave and you're watching this. I hope that you have benefited from it. This is the whole reason, the whole purpose of me doing this. Whatever I learned, I'm sharing it with you, and I hope that you benefited from it. Whatever wrong that was said is from me, and may Allah forgive me, and please make dua for me that Allah forgives me whatever wrong I said, and whatever good you earn from this is from Allah. Yeah. So we will finish here. I don't know if Brother Muhammad Rayyan, if you're still there, if you have any questions or whatever. I don't know. I don't seem to understand. Oh, hello. I think that's what you wanted to say. Hello. Okay, fine. Hello. I didn't see it properly earlier on. Yeah, HLO. Okay. You'd rather when you come into a class like this to give salam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, rather than hello. Yeah. But anyway, if there's anybody else, any questions, right? Otherwise, we'll finish here, and I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah, for the Aqidah lesson, which is the book. What do you call it? Radiance of Faith. Lughmatul Ittiqad, which is written by Sheikh Al-Maqdisi, Abu Qudama Al-Maqdisi, and commentary translated by Dr. Abu Amina, Sheikh Abu Amina Bilal Philips. Please make dua for him. I always make dua for him, for my teacher. So please make dua for him. So I think we'll end here now. And Subhana Rabbika Rabbil Izzati Amma Yasifun wa Salamun ala al-Mursaleen walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.